Traffic. Everybody talks about it, most of us are affected by it, and Montgomery County has a lot of it. But what is traffic? How do we measure how bad it is? And what are we doing about it? The citizens of Montgomery County are asking these and many other questions about traffic, and rightly so. Fortunately, there are some answers. But sometimes those answers can get lost in the jargon of the transportation engineers and planners. For the next 20 minutes or so, I'll tell you about traffic in everyday terms. I'll show you some of the causes of traffic congestion. I'll explain what we mean by the term level of service. I'll explain and demonstrate some of the ways we measure the quality of traffic flow. And I'll describe how traffic flow measures, such as level of service, are used to help achieve the desired quality of life in Montgomery County. How do we as motorists experience traffic? We want smooth-flowing traffic at a comfortable speed. However, in all urban areas, there are locations where traffic is anything but smooth and comfortable at various times during the day. Rush hour traffic congestion is commonplace in densely developed areas, such as downtown Bethesda and downtown Silver Spring. Traffic congestion can occur on weekends as well as during the week in retail areas like around Lake Forest Mall and around White Flint. And we know that freeways, such as I-270, can have long traffic backups during peak periods. This phenomenon is called vehicle delay. Delay occurs whenever you have to travel slower than you'd like to. When you stop at a traffic signal, that's a form of vehicle delay. On a freeway, if you're forced to travel at less than your desired speed, you're experiencing delay. There are many factors that can have an effect on traffic flow. Here are just a few examples. Obviously, having too few lanes to handle the traffic volume can cause vehicle delay. Vehicles waiting to turn can cause delay, especially left-turning vehicles. The number and types of trucks in the traffic stream can have an effect on traffic flow. Depending on the locations and durations of their stops, buses can impede traffic flow. So, where buses cause a particular problem, we construct special pullouts to get the buses out of the flow of traffic. Pedestrians also affect traffic flow because they need time to cross intersections just like vehicles do. Traffic signals have an effect too. If they're timed improperly, they can cause delay. But if they're well timed in a system of signals, they can significantly improve traffic flow. And then, of course, there are traffic accidents. Double parked vehicles, and so on. Dozens of factors can either hinder or improve the flow of traffic. Now, traffic engineers have developed a method for describing the quality of traffic flow. It's called the traffic level of service. This level of service scale rates the extent of traffic congestion with a letter grade from A through F. A is an excellent level of service with little or no delay. F is the worst condition with extensive traffic delay. Unlike school, where a grade of C is considered average and anything less is considered poor performance, traffic levels of service of D and E are often considered acceptable during the peak hours. On a typical roadway in Montgomery County, traffic is heaviest during the peak commuting periods, during the morning and evening rush hours. Generally, the evening peak hour of traffic represents the highest hourly volume over a full day. We use these peak hours in Montgomery County's transportation growth policy and management plans. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to show you what we mean by the different levels of service. What does level of service C or level of service F look like? This film shows the intersection of Rockville Pike coming toward us and Nicholson Lane crossing the middle of the screen. The film was taken from a building located at the White Flint Metro Rail station. Your view is southward toward Bethesda. Immediately off the screen to the left is White Flint Mall. This film shows traffic at its actual speed. The film that you're about to see is in fast motion, 12 times faster than actual, filmed using a time-lapse movie camera. So you'll see about 12 minutes of traffic per minute of viewing. The camera angle is still the same. The traffic appears to be moving 12 times faster than its actual speed. The traffic flowing toward us is on northbound Rockville Pike. This film was taken around 3 in the afternoon, so the heavier flow is northbound from Bethesda toward us on the screen. Notice that after a long line of northbound vehicles gets through the intersection, the next vehicles come to a stop. What's happening is the signal has turned red. The buildup of vehicles at a traffic signal is called a queue. The signal has changed, and the queue is building again. For level of service C, every vehicle in the queue gets through the intersection easily when the signal turns green. Our first minute illustrates level of service C conditions for northbound Rockville Pike traffic. It's important to note that even at level of service C, some motorists still experience a moderate amount of delay at the intersection. Now let's move about half an hour later to level of service D conditions. Notice that the total traffic on northbound Rockville Pike has increased and the queues are longer. Let's watch northbound traffic move through the intersection. There are fewer gaps between vehicles. The stream of traffic is nearly continuous. Traffic has slowed to a moderate rate of speed, 30 to 35 miles an hour, and an increasing proportion of the traffic is forced to stop at the signal and to experience more delay than at level of service C. Now that we've seen levels of service C and D, let's move to level of service E. It's now around 5 in the evening, right in the middle of the peak period. Notice the longer queues, especially for the northbound left-turning vehicles. After the signal changes, not all the left-turning vehicles make it through the intersection. Notice also that the queue of southbound left-turning vehicles is longer and is not clearing through the intersection when the signal changes to green. More delay is experienced at level of service E than at level of service D. Now for level of service F. By 5:30 in the evening on the day the film was taken, an accident nearby caused traffic to back up along Rockville Pike all the way through the Nicholson Lane intersection. Traffic is moving just a few car lengths at a time. The northbound traffic queue extends beyond our field of vision. But it's also important to note that while northbound Rockville Pike is moving at level of service F, southbound appears to be moving much better, in this case at level of service D. So as you can see, two motorists approaching the same intersection from different directions can very easily experience very different levels of congestion. Up to this point, I focused primarily on what levels of service look like at intersections. Similar to intersections, motorists on freeways can experience delays. This regular speed film shows I-270 between the Democracy Boulevard and Montrose Road interchanges at the Y-split just north of the Capitol Beltway. We're looking north toward Montrose Road. Northbound traffic, going away from the camera, is moving at approximately 50 to 60 miles an hour and at level of service C. As you can see, motorists are having a relatively easy time switching lanes and can travel at their desired speed. Now back to the time-lapse photography. Same location, same camera angle. About 3 minutes of traffic will be shown during this next 15 seconds. This is level of service D. Traffic is heavy, but still moving freely. Now we move 2 hours later to around 5 in the evening. Northbound traffic is stop and go at level of service F. Notice the waves of traffic flow. Vehicles come to a stop, then move forward a short distance, then stop again. Remember, this film shows the traffic moving 12 times faster than its actual speed. Notice that southbound traffic coming toward the camera is moving smoothly, in this case at level of service D. As motorists, we certainly would prefer to travel without traffic congestion and with the freedom to maneuver at our desired speed. However, in order to achieve, say, level of service C during the peak hours at every intersection, many new roads would need to be built, and many existing roads would need to be widened. These projects would have an extremely high price tag, not only in dollars, but also in terms of physical disruption to existing residential and commercial areas. As taxpayers, we also want to minimize the cost of public facilities. We therefore want to optimize the use of our existing roadway system. We get the most vehicles through the system at level of service E, so we're faced with the delicate balancing of the quality of traffic flow in the eyes of the motorist with the need to make the most efficient use of our public facilities. The time-lapse films you just saw presented two indications of level of service: queue length at intersections and vehicle delay at intersections and on freeways. There's also a third way that transportation engineers define the traffic level of service. It's called critical lane volume analysis. This measure is derived from actual counts of traffic passing through an intersection. To illustrate how this technique works, let's take a simple four-legged intersection with a traffic signal. On each approach, for this example, there is only one straight-through lane and one. Southbound traffic have a green signal, eastbound and westbound. And when eastbound and westbound traffic have green, northbound and southbound traffic stops. Two conflicting movements. Obviously, north-south and east-west traffic can't go through the intersection at the same time. Therefore, the traffic signal has to provide enough time for both the east-west and north-south traffic to pass through the critical part of the intersection, the center. And there are additional traffic conflicts within just the east-west traffic. For example, the eastbound straight-through traffic conflicts with the westbound left-turning traffic. The signal has to be timed to allow both vehicle movements to pass through the intersection at different times. First, let's look at the eastbound approach. Let's assume that during a 1-hour period, there are 500 eastbound vehicles going straight through the intersection and 200 turning left. For this example, we'll assume that no one turns right. On the westbound approach, there are 600 vehicles going straight through the intersection and 400 turning left. In our simple example, the eastbound through vehicles cross the path of the westbound left-turning vehicles. Therefore, we need enough time during the hour for 500 eastbound through and 400 westbound left-turning vehicles, or 900 vehicles, to pass through the same point, the middle of the intersection, the critical part. Likewise, the total of the 600 westbound through and 200 eastbound left-turning vehicles is 800 vehicles. The critical value, the higher value, for the east-west traffic is 900. If there is enough time for the 900 vehicles to pass through the intersection, there will also be time for the 800 vehicles. That covers the westbound and eastbound traffic. But we also have to record traffic movements on the other intersection approaches. To complete the critical lane analysis, we need to look at the northbound and southbound approaches and their conflicting traffic movements. Assuming a north-south critical lane volume of 500, the total critical lane volume for the intersection is 900 plus 500, or 1,400. As I mentioned earlier, this calculated critical lane volume of 1,400 can be used to determine the intersection's level of service. The ranges of critical lane volumes for each level of service are illustrated here. The right-hand column lists the 6 level of service grades, A through F. The left-hand column lists the critical lane volume ranges that correspond to each particular level of service. Level of service A has critical lane volumes of less than 1,000. For the intersection we just analyzed, we calculated a critical lane volume of 1,400, which falls within the level of service D range. Now let's recap. I've shown you several different measures for level of service at a typical intersection. At level of service D, congested but typical of peak hours, we would expect average stopped vehicle delays of up to 40 seconds at each signalized intersection, queues up to 20 vehicles long, and critical lane volumes between 1,300 and 1,450 critical movements. This is an illustration of values that are typical for the intersection we just looked at, Rockville Pike and Nicholson Lane. Similar tables can be developed for the other levels of service and for other types of intersections. For individual motorists, vehicle delay, travel speed, and queue length vary a good deal, even during the same time period. Even at level of service C, some motorists have to stop for a red signal at the intersection, while most pass through the intersection on green. And even at level of service E, some motorists will pass directly through the intersection without stopping, thereby experiencing virtually no delay. Therefore, when we talk about the level of service for an intersection or for a freeway, we mean the average level of service over a 1-hour period, usually the peak hour. For intersections in Montgomery County, we determine the level of service by using the critical lane volume analysis which I just described. For local area transportation review, levels of service are used to describe the specific traffic conditions at particular intersections adjacent to a proposed development. Level of service E represents the maximum that Montgomery County considers acceptable. As I said earlier, these intersection levels of service portray traffic conditions for the most congested or critical traffic movement. However, the non-critical traffic flows, such as in the off-peak direction, could very well experience significantly better levels of service than do the peak direction traffic flows. They do experience delays of their own, but those delays will be less than for the critical movements. From the point of view of travelers in the county, we usually experience several different levels of service along different parts of our trip. Consequently, most people tend to view level of service as an average over many roadway segments and intersections. Montgomery County uses both the intersection level of service and the concept of average level of service for an area to determine the adequacy of public facilities within the annual growth policy. This average level of service for an area is based on the level of service for each of the different roadways throughout an entire policy area. The intersection and area-wide level of service concepts are key elements of our efforts to guide the orderly development of Montgomery County. As just a few examples, a balanced highway and transit system serves the needs of all county residents and provides us with alternative modes of travel. People need good access to retail centers. Access plays a major part in deciding where to shop, in Montgomery County or elsewhere. For those of us who work in the county, a safe and efficient roadway system plays a role in our choice of workplace. And future employers thinking about moving into Montgomery County also consider the levels of traffic congestion when they're selecting a business site. In this tape, we've looked at traffic from a perspective that most people don't often consider. I've shown you how traffic congestion can be measured for detailed analysis. The quality of any given trip can be quantified by measuring the vehicle delay, or by counting the vehicles in queues at an intersection and observing whether or not the queue clears through the intersection when the signal turns green. These measurements result in a rating that classifies the average quality of traffic flow over a full hour. 6 levels of service, A through F. These levels of service are used for local area transportation review and for determining the adequacy of public facilities within the annual growth policy. Traffic congestion is one of the central issues in terms of quality of life in Montgomery County. It's our hope that this videotape provides a better understanding of the nature of traffic congestion and the role that it plays in setting public policy. Through studies and analyses, through cooperation and planning, we can all work toward the one basic goal: getting the most out of our existing transportation system and providing for the needs of the future.